Welcome to Behind the Screens, Conversations with Background Screening Pros. I'm Les Rosen, your host, and I'm excited to have you here. On this podcast, we chat with the people who know the background screening world inside and out. Executives, industry experts, legal pros, and more. We dive into their personal stories and insights to give you a real look at what's happening behind the scenes. Whether you work in the screening industry or are just curious, Behind the Screens bring you the real, unfiltered conversations from the people who make it all happen. Stick around for stories you won't hear anywhere else. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another episode of Behind the Screens, Conversations with Background Screening Pros. Let me once again thank our platinum sponsor, Barry Nixon, the Pre-Employment Directory, the Background Buzz, for supporting this. And our object here, when we want to introduce people to the background pros, the people that actually make the industry run, who actually do the things that we do. And they are in our industry. We're very lucky to have with us people that are very professional and dedicated, very hardworking, and totally focused on excellence. And excellence when it comes to legal compliance, working with clients, working with teams, working with consumers and employers and vendors. And we have a person here who, in my experience, exemplifies excellence in the screening industry, one of the people who make the screening industry go. And it's a pleasure to introduce to the program Mallory Opperman. Mallory, how are you? How are you doing
Hi,
today?
doing well.
Good. Well, it's a real pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
And I had the chance to work with you at PBSA on an educational program, and obviously I'm familiar with your career, and everything you've done is very impressive, and very glad you've taken some time out to talk to us. So thank you.
Thank you.
So tell us about what you're doing now, and what do you find most interesting about that?
Yeah, so I recently started a new position with Accurate. I'm a senior project manager here. So just kind of getting settled into the role and things are kind of getting laid out. But, one of the things I think that's most interesting is being able to touch just all areas of the screening process. So, sometimes we're talking about criminal records. Other days we're talking about applicant tracking system integrations. So, really there's a lot of variety, and I think that helps to really keep it interesting.
So there's never a dull moment.
That's right.
Oh, that's great. So you get to see lots of different things. And obviously Accurate's a great company, but before Accurate, you were with another great company. Why don't you tell us about your career there?
Yeah, so prior to Accurate, I was with Orange Tree Employment Screening. I started there as a criminal research assistant back in 2007. So really just kind of starting in the beginning, I was working on criminal cases. Back then we would look stuff up online and then we would print it off. We would then scan it into the system. We would type it into the system. So a very manual process at that time. We were still faxing things, calling where we needed to. So it was really a different time there, but actually it was one of my favorite times because we had such a tight-knit team. We really knew what our roles were, and everybody was working so hard to really get through the work and go through that quickly. But starting, before things were automated, that did give me the opportunity to grow and learn, as the technology advanced and as we were able to, maybe we can automate some of these things. Maybe we can get some integrations in place and really play a key role in developing that. I was able to move from the criminal research assistant into a management role with, managing our operations center. So that was really great to be able to expand. I can also not only learn about criminal records, but verifications and drug screening, occupational health, and go through that full life cycle of all of the things that the teams are touching.
And you actually ran teams that did all those things, right?
I did. Yep, I did.
As you lived your career, right?
Yep, exactly. So I had to oversee, I think it was 4 different teams. Some that, were already put together and others that I was adding people to. So It was really neat to be able to influence, how is the process going? What can we do to improve? How can we think about, the candidate, the client, and our employees to really make the process as streamlined as possible?
So for people that have entered the screening industry more recently, go back to the beginning days, back to 2007. You talked about scanning and manual data entry. And what was that all about? People probably scratching their head and going, "Oh my God, how could that even happen?" Right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of it really was a lot of the same sites that you might use today, but there wasn't, the screen scraping, there wasn't the integrations. It was you literally had to go type in a person's name and find the cases and decide, is this in a certain number of years, match up the identifiers. There wasn't a system that was going to flag, oh,
Right.
this isn't a match. You had to go look and make sure that you were typing things in correctly, that you were reviewing things correctly, that you knew the laws of the states and what you could or couldn't report. You knew the FCRA requirements. There wasn't anything that was going to help you find that. So there was a lot of training to make
Right.
sure that the teams
And
knew what they could do.
and were those during the days we actually had to run the social trace to figure out which counties to run?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so
Yep.
yeah, a lot of people don't realize that you actually would get a name, and depending upon the system, or if you had a system, you actually had to type in unless your client did it. And then at a time there was a big debate whether clients would do that. That was before APIs and integrations. And
Hmm.
then someone actually you couldn't even send out the criminal orders until someone ran a social trace. You knew which counties to ask, and then you
Yep.
fax those to your vendors. So
Yep.
and there might be some people listening to this thing that we're making that up, but no, that's the way it was early on. So that's
Yeah, it was. And the amount of paper that we went through was kind of crazy. We actually ended up doing some lean events, we called it, to try and reduce waste or, improve processes. And one of those things was paper reduction. And I don't remember the exact numbers now, but there was just pallets of paper that we would go through
right.
as we would print things off. And once we moved to an electronic process, that was a big savings, not only in money, but in time. The people that were running it and handing it to other departments to do stuff with and filing it and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, in the early days, when I got involved in background, we actually had a file. We had Monday was blue because of Blue Monday. We had the Monday orders and the Tuesday orders, and you were constantly, back when things were really manual. So at some point, you got to the point where that you were the actual operation managers, and I see from looking at LinkedIn, you had 3 internal teams, and you covered really the whole gambit: driving records, criminal records, drug testing, occupational health, employment verification, education. So you had your fingers in everything.
I did. Yeah, I did. And it was really, it's helpful to know, right, the full cycle of an order,
Hmm.
that it's not just individual teams that are working on something. This is a real candidate that has all of these credentials and these things that you're checking and being able to really kind of play a hand in, how are we going to make this a full process rather than just segmented different parts of their order.
No, that's exactly right. And from the client's point of view, of course, you could get, you might have 20 searches, you get 19 done right away, but that 20th is an old employment. And as far as they're concerned, the whole thing is late. If you're
Right.
saying, no, we got 19 out of 20 done right away, but
Yeah.
clients think differently than we do in operations. So you mentioned lean process, and
Hmm.
as I recall, you have a lot of expertise in that. And for those of you that, obviously you can go to the library, you can read, 1,000 books on lean process written by professors and critical thinkers and so forth. But you actually lived and breathed it. So for the uninitiated, tell us just a few words, although people can write dissertations on this. Explain to us a little bit about a lean process.
Yeah, so we would go through, we would decide what is the sort of topic we're going to focus on. There
Mhm.
was different lean events that we would have each year, but we would pick a point of focus and then we would really get down to document every single part of the process. We would put it up on a wall and we would have like yarn that would connect different processes together to really just see it. So that was kind of the first important step, is just writing out, what do we do? Why do we do it? And just get everything out there so people could see it. And then from there, we would go through and say, okay, is there a step in this that maybe we're doing for no reason? Or do we not know the reason? Do we need to go and find out what that reason is?
All right.
And then really break down those different steps. Like, is there things we can just remove, or are there things that we can improve the process? And it really changed from, when things were manual. Could it be as easy as, rather than walking to this person's desk, every time I have a printout, I'm going to walk there every hour. It could be things as simple as that.
Right.
But then once it got to be, we had more technology, it might be things like, I'm going to identify this technology enhancement, and I'm going to work with the IT team to see, how would we code that into the system? How would we test that? How would we release that out to our clients as a new feature? So it really could be as simple as things that you had control of yourself as a team, or it could be things that you're relying on technology or enhancements to really do.
And so the very process of doing that, it becomes the spec for the tech team to follow because
Mhm.
you tell a tech team do something, they have no idea. They need to know what outcomes you need and what goes
Yeah.
into it. Oh, that's fascinating. So,
Yeah.
so you were knee deep in all of that. I mean, the nitty gritty. I mean, the details of all that. Oh, that's fantastic. And part of it that I think is really interesting is the team building part. I mean, you were in charge of a number of teams. Obviously, I mean, it's a truism that you're really only as good as your people, and your people have to work in teams. Been your experience in team building? What kind of sticks out in your mind as a key piece of advice? Keeping in mind that people can read untold books on the topic, but you've actually done it. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's always hard to find people that have experience in the background screen industry. So you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt. So what the things I would look for would be, people that can learn quickly, people that take ownership, that if you give them something to do, they're going to focus on doing
Mhm.
that. And really those that can be self-starters, be curious. And then once we had those individual teams, trying to make sure that we're a good steward of what we're doing for the next team, right? So if you're the ones that's starting with the information, it
Right.
might be easier for you to do something a certain way, but it might be more helpful for the team downstream if you did just a couple other things differently. So trying to make sure that we're not so siloed between the teams and that we're, as you're passing something off to the next group, that it's really in, the perfect condition that they need it to be in. They have all the information they need, that you've done your part to move something through the process.
That's outstanding. And I know you were successful because your team, what you produced, was such a high level of excellence. So that's great. One of the things that's interesting is that sometimes you talk to people outside the industry who might be potential investors and so forth. They think, well, every industry is the same. Every industry thinks they're special. But what's your thoughts on that? I mean, is the skills you bring, is it universal to any business, or are there special skills related just because background screening is such a unique topic?
Yeah, it is very unique. I think, definitely being kept up to date with the laws and just the certain requirements of how a background screen goes. Some people think that it's as simple as you can just put in a social security number and you get
Right.
everybody's information and it's so easy, but we all know that's not the case. So there's definitely that. But then I think there's other skills that are transferable elsewhere, communication, working as a team, learning and being curious. Those sort of things I think could be, taken in any industry.
Yeah, and I think people don't realize how many moving parts there are in a background
Mhm.
check. And of course, I assume that part of the lean process improvement is continuous improvement, right? I mean, always going
Mhm.
back to the drawing board, right? So
Yes,
what you can do better next, exactly. Well,
exactly.
you've certainly had your hands in everything. Do you have a favorite area of background screening, or that they're all? I mean, verifications or education or crems, or do you just like the process, the way
Yeah.
at the end of the day a report comes out?
Yeah, I do like the process. My heart will always be with criminal. That's where I
Hmm.
started. And, that's where
Okay,
I always kind of have a soft spot. But, prior to the role that I'm in now, I did work with solutions and implementation. So I really did enjoy that too, just kind of being at the decision that a client might make to come on board with us. And, really showing them how we can build a process that's going to meet your
right,
needs, that's maybe going to get creative in things that they haven't thought of, or maybe our system can't quite do, but how do we make it work? I
right.
really like that part of it too.
Oh, that's great. So you've had just such a wide range of experience. That's really interesting. What was your path to get to where you are now? I mean, what was your path to even enter the background screening world?
Yeah, so right when I graduated college, I was just looking for, what do I want to do? I happened to see a post for Orange Tree in the paper back when, jobs were posted in the paper. And I didn't know, what does a background screen entail? I didn't know if I was qualified. I didn't know what to expect, but I thought, well, I'll just apply and I'll see what happens. So I was really happy to be offered that position and spent a handful of years, like we talked about in that criminal research role. And that really, it was so much fun and so different than I think you'd ever imagine. Like you don't necessarily grow up thinking, oh, I want to do background screens when you're little.
Right.
But to realize, we had a lot of fun doing it. And then from there, moving into the operations manager role, a lot like we talked about with just building the teams and also the process improvements, and then moving into the implementation and solutions role from there. So I really, Orange True was really supportive of my growth and just gave me a lot of opportunities to try new things, try different departments, just keeping me interested in what I was doing and learning. And
Right.
that was really big for me.
Because you accelerated, you had quite a career path. You went from a entry level to managing, teams for a large company. That's really impressive. What's really interesting too about criminal records, because your experience with criminal records, looking at the reportability and the accuracy and whether it's actionable, even though there's a lot of technology, I think that part really hasn't changed because we now live in an era of individualized assessment and the EEOC requirements and fair chance hiring and so forth. So your background there, I think, is still very relevant. I'd be curious to see how much AI or processes can really make criminal record reporting go faster because there's just so many rules, laws, and regulations about that.
There are. Yep, there are. And I think that's where kind of a human comes in and can make those high level decisions, and their touch points are stuff that I think will be hard to reproduce.
So going a little broader, beyond the jobs and the people and the clients and the customers and the vendors and all that sort of ecosystem that you work with, what do you like most about your career in the background screening industry in general?
Yeah, I think really it's just been the opportunity to try so many different things. I think the variety has kept me interested. I really love to learn. So, an industry where there's plenty to learn has kept me engaged. I think too, I've met a lot of great people along the way, forged a lot of good relationships. So, just knowing kind of we're all doing the same sort of things and working together through
Mm-hmm.
that. And then I also think just seeing the industry evolve, like really being part of the change from paper to technology and having a hand in that, that was a lot of fun.
And I hear that from people talking about the concern of this process of continually challenged. And I think I've commented on other podcasts that, I yeah, there's a point in which I thought, well, I know a lot about this. And then a half hour later, the guides tell you, no, you don't. Something comes up that's brand new, that is out of left field, like, oh my gosh, I had no idea this was a big issue. And it's, you're back to square one. You never, you never, yeah, you're right. It's just, it's part of the actual challenge. There's always something new. I mean, part of the area, one area that you really, I think is one of your specialties too, is FCRA compliance, if I understand it.
Yeah, I did some work with the PBSA on putting together FCRA back to basics. So it was one of the main things that we wanted to focus on. And I think it was, for me, when I started out in the PBSA, just thinking, I don't know if I have much to give here. I'm not an expert in these things. And so when we came up with the Back to Basics program, we were really thinking about, this is the basic stuff that people need to know.
Mm-hmm.
And, there are industry experts outside of the committee that we really put together to try and give that information, but really trying to think about how can we help the people that are starting out? How can we give them basics? So we went through and did FCRA 101, 102. We did adverse action. We did criminal and then other records as well. So just really trying to show how we can help all levels of people. And it's always good review for anybody, even if you are an expert.
And where is that now? I mean, that's how I met you because I appreciate the fact you had me do, and one of the tapes on sort of introduction to the industry. I mean, it's a great resource. Where can people find that?
Yeah, so it's on the PBSA website. I believe it's under the resources tab even. So it is there. You can watch it at any time. So if people want to go in and, watch it multiple times, it's there. You don't have to register, I don't think. There's, I think, 5 different modules that you can watch, and it will tell you the different topics that you have to choose from.
And it also struck me as being a really great tool for people that are just for new hires. And you bring in somebody and they're just starting, and at some point have them watch, 5 hours is a big commitment, but those 5 hours, I think it really tells you, it's a lot of education, right?
It is. Yep.
Yeah. What committee were you on when you were involved with that?
Yeah, so I was on the Educational Resources Committee. I co-chaired that for a few years and then also was a delegate to the U.S. Council leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So that was during my time. And I'll just give a plug to the ERC. If anybody is looking to volunteer or spend some time, it's a great place to start. I think it's a great one for people who are just getting started and you're just not sure, right? I think for me, I joined and I just listened for a while.
Mm-hmm.
You don't necessarily have to join in for a task force or anything. Just listen and it kind of gets you comfortable. And then from there, you can see, hey, these are the things they're working on. These are the things where I might want to join in. And really what they do is they put together different topics for webinars and for the different conventions and or the conferences rather, and trying to find the people that want to present to that. So really just having ideas on what would you like to learn about? What is a good thing for people in the industry to know? You don't have to be the expert. You just have to have the ideas. So I'd give that plug, join that committee.
And I think that 5-part tape series put together is a tremendous contribution you made to the industry, because it's just, the idea that new people to the industry or people thinking of investing or getting involved can sit there and in 5 hours, which is a relatively short period of time, there is so much information that you've made available. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. And it's not. And also, I have to point out, if in case people don't recall, that you were a volunteer of the month for PBSA.
Yes, thank you.
Well, now, and tell us a bit more about your experience with PBSA. I mean, you've already explained some of that. What role has it played in your career?
Yeah, I think just getting to know people that are doing the same sort of things. And, everybody has a little bit different way of doing things, but it's really great to have a soundboard to discuss, what do you think is the best practice here? What are you guys doing? We run into this issue. What do you suggest? What have you tried? Just having people that you can talk about that. They know what you're going through. They know the same sort of things. You don't have to kind of give them the backstory of, this is what we're trying to accomplish. Right, yeah. They have all that. So I think it's a great group to be with. If, if their company can get them to a conference, I'd highly suggest that, because it's great to see everybody come together. So even if you can't go every year, maybe every couple of years, try and get in. Right. It's really fun.
And I think one of the points that you were alluding to is the fact that, when you're having these conversations, these are with, quote unquote competitors in different firms from all over the country, but it doesn't seem to matter in our industry.
Yep, exactly. I don't think you probably see that everywhere.
Yeah. You're able to have these types of conversations. Oh, that's all. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing all that.
Yeah.
One of the things that just struck me, just a random thought, even going back to sort of the early parts of the industry when you were newish, 2007, 2008, even with all that manual work, even before automation, the industry still pretty consistently got reports out within 3 working days. Mm-hmm. Barring some out of control exception. I mean, if an employer won't call back or school is closed, that might, or a criminal clerk won't, give you the record so you can verify it. But the 72-hour or less rule, I think even in effect was back then people were able to do it.
Yeah, they were. We did spend a lot of time, manually checking, how far out are we? Do we need to follow up with this? There wasn't systems that would flag it and say, oh, this is late, or, where are we at on this, and add an ETA. That was all manual, but there was still that drive to get things done quickly and really push it out as fast as we can.
Yeah. And now with AI and big databases, there's a lot of instant searches, but that's a whole different topic than an instant search. Mm-hmm. It is not always, but people can talk about that at conferences, whether the value of an instant search and whether that's a real search or not, or so forth.
Right.
But anyway, that's beyond what we want to do in this podcast. But yeah, it was those were the fun days and that's sort of a shared universal experience. So before automation, you say, okay, it's approaching 72 hours. Why is it still in our system? What's holding it up, right? And clients calling in, and okay, where's that file? So, all right, those were crazy days. So let's move away from background screening and tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, you've had this fascinating career in background screening, doing just a lot of great things at a very high level. But outside of background screening, can you share with us your hobbies, interests, what you do outside of work? What do you do for fun when you're not screening people? Right.
Sure. Yeah. So I live in Clear Lake, Iowa with my husband, Adam, and my kids. I have a 14-year-old son, Noah, and a almost 11-year-old daughter, Avery. And they keep us pretty busy. So my son's in cross country and band. So we travel quite a bit for him to go participate in those. And then my daughter does competitive dance, and she does softball. So really just getting kids all over, but we love it. We love to watch them compete, and we love to just be involved in that. So that's fun for us. Outside of that, for myself, I love to read. I do yoga. My husband and I recently took up golf. We're not very good, but we're trying.
All right.
Just spending some time
I golf
outside.
too, but where I golf, there's dragons and windmills.
Oh, yeah, right.
And on the 18th hole, your little orange ball goes away, but you're probably talking about another type of golfing.
Yeah.
No, it's really interesting because there's other people I've talked to in the podcast who are involved in that circuit where every weekend there's a tournament, an activity, a competition. And sometimes I'll go to a hotel and I see these parents scurrying around trying to round up these kids, and they're there obviously they've been to Costco and they have tons of juices and snacks, and it's like they're going crazy. So you're on that circuit, and
Yes.
yeah. Every weekend there's a competition. There's cross country meet, or your daughter's in. There are always things to do, right?
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
So that would take up your weekend. So tell us something perhaps that people may not know about you that might surprise them.
Well, I would say I'm a planner. I really like to have a to-do list and check things off the list. So everything is kind of mindful, and I like to keep things to my plan if I can. But kind of going from that, I love to plan parties. I love to have the kids' birthday parties and let them choose a theme, and I can just go all out, make the decorations and the
Oh,
food
fantastic.
that fits the theme. So I like to have fun with that.
With two kids that age involved in the number of activities they're involved in, and all the responsibilities you have to be a planner. I mean,
Yeah.
how could you live your life
Yeah.
if there wasn't a plan? And someday they'll go off to college and you'll wonder, how did we possibly do all that?
I know
Right?
it.
I was just thinking all the number of hours I spent at the youth basketball with my daughter. It's like, wow. I feel like I spent half my life there. So one of the things we like to ask people, and this is just sort of top of mind, top of head, not trying to go into detail here, but I like to talk about changes and challenges. And I think we talked about some of that, but let's start with changes. What do you think are the biggest changes you've seen in the industry or might see, and what are some of the biggest challenges? Not related to a particular firm or anything, but just in general.
Yeah. So one of the biggest changes for me, I think, was just automation. So in processing the services and fulfilling the services, it really gives time where people are giving high value added touches rather than, some of the things that you can just have system do. So they're adding more value. They're making decisions about things. So I think that's really been a positive. Some of the things that I think about for, upcoming things that might be issues. I think, there's ever changing legislation, and there really is, every state kind of has their own thing going on. So keeping up with that, keeping compliant, helping the clients, keeping up to date information out to them. And then definitely access to information. So PII redaction, being able to get at the cases that we need, court clerk assistance, all of that, I think has been issues recently, and I think will continue to be.
Yeah. I mean, I live in the independent Republic of California, and here we have not only a statewide ban on the box, but LA County has rules, and San Francisco has rules, and the San Francisco and LA County rules are different. And it's just insanity to try to manage all that. And then you add to the fact that people are trying to play hide the ball with date of birth, thinking somehow that helps, and it really doesn't. I mean, but anyway. Well, I guess we're preaching to the choir on that one.
Right.
All right. That's why we need PBSA to jump in and do all that. Well, this has been a fascinating. I've loved to hear everything, and congratulations on a fantastic career and everything else you're doing. Are there any closing thoughts or anything that we glossed over or you wanted to add?
I would just say, everybody just continue to learn and be curious if you're interested in getting in the industry. I think, just really get involved if you can. I just echo that. And yeah, thank you.
And that's really my final question. Do you have any advice for people that are either thinking of entering the profession, or they just entered, or they've been in it a year or two and trying to think about whether they want to stay in it? What's your advice for being in the industry and the best way to advance in the industry?
Yeah, I would say is just to learn, get cross-trained if you can, learn a different department, help out. I think that there's always value in knowing more than what you need to know for your physician. So, be curious and try to learn more.
So curiosity and adding value by learning more.
Yes.
Great advice. Mallory Opperman, if anyone wants to find out more about you, you're available on LinkedIn. I'm sure if someone reaches out, you'd be happy to talk to them. I assume?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, that's great. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate it. This has been another great edition of Behind the Screens, Conversations with Background Screening Pros. And our pro today, I was delighted to talk to, was Mallory Opperman. Mallory, thank you.
Thank you, Les.
All right, that was yet another wonderful conversation with a background screening pro. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an update. And hey, if you got a moment, we'd love for you to leave us a review. It really helps get the word out. For more info or to catch up on past episodes, or to make suggestions or to suggest possible future guests, head over to our website. Once again, this is your host, Les Rosen, and it's been a pleasure to bring you another episode. See you on the next episode. Thanks.